Rube, it's hard to believe it's the off season already, and it's like we're not just in the off season; it's like the middle of the off season already.
Yeah, you come up for air after the Super Bowl and you look at the calendar and it's like the middle of February. Like, how did we get here? John Clark just flew down to Florida for spring training. He was on the flight with us from Arizona just a couple days ago. So it's a challenge for a team because all your efforts are going into the Super Bowl. And then the draft is 2 months away. The combine's in a couple weeks, and obviously the scouting department's been hard at work preparing for that. But it's a short off season when you get to a Super Bowl, and they have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and the Eagles are playing catch up a little bit in that regard. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. We're presented by Nissan, as always. Reuben, a lot to get to. We just got back from NovaCare Complex, our year-end press conference, or our season-end press conference, I should say, with Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman. Some newsy items from that, some big picture items. We'll go through all of it on the first half of this podcast. But the two newsy things to come out of it were Michael Clay returning in 2023, and Nick Sirianni will still not call plays next year.
Yeah, so both those newsy bits are kind of status quo. Things will stay the same. Which is big for Nick. I think he really likes continuity in a lot of ways. We'll start with Michael Clay. I don't think he's a very good coach. I've been clear on that since he got here. I didn't think he would survive 2021, honestly. They got better the second half of this year, but then obviously a huge breakdown in the Super Bowl. Really costly. I mean, as bad as any play in the game, almost. Yeah. That punt return. I don't know. I'm a little surprised. Of course, we have sat in that room before when a head coach has said an assistant will be back, and the next day we got an email that he won't be back. Yeah. So you never know, but it looks like he will. And it's not ideal. I mean, they just haven't been good on special teams for a couple of years now.
Yeah, I do agree with their assessment that they got better in the second half of the season. So I'm trying really hard not to put too much emphasis on one play. It was a really big play. It's a tricky deal. I think they did get better throughout this year. I'm trying to look at it objectively. I see their point. And if the season was reversed and they started off playing well and it got worse, I think they probably would make a change. But the fact that it went the other way, I don't know. You can kind of determine whether or not you think that's the right way to go about this. If that's any better, I think that's better because there's improvement, there's growth. Clay maybe got better, even though he said he didn't do anything different. I'm kind of with you. I don't think he's necessarily done anything to keep his job, but I agree with you that Nick likes continuity and that they're already replacing two of the coordinators. So maybe that's part of it.
I was thinking
just keep one of those guys in place if you can.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good reason.
And I thought with the personnel they have, they should have been better. They have a lot of young guys because their young guys don't play on offense or defense, most of them. So they do have a lot of guys playing a lot of snaps who are pretty good athletes and pretty physical. So you just think they should be better. Actually, it's ironic. Punt coverage was the one area they're pretty good at all year. I think they were 8th in the league.
Yeah, they have decent gunners.
Yeah. I'm a little surprised, but not shocked just because Nick just doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's going to fire coaches. But I think it's a mistake. I mean, we've seen some really good special teams coaches here. Obviously, Harbs for a long time. I thought Dave Phipp was really good. Do
you think this organization prioritizes special teams as much as it used to? I mean, because I'm thinking back to those good Phipp years. I really wasn't here for the Harbs years, but when Phipp was here, they had their, Chris Maragos and Brian Brayman. They had good returners. They prioritized and they put resources into special teams. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong because I think the resources you're putting in offense and defense showed this year, and that's obviously more important. But their special teams have taken a step back without those marquee guys.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they had Sproles, who, was as good as anyone for quite a few years. I mean, he was better here as a returner than in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. He was great. They've always had that, that elite guy, whether it was Brian Mitchell or Westbrook or Deshaun. They've always had that. I think Covey gets the most out of his ability, but
he got better as the year went on. Had a 27-yard return in the Super Bowl.
It was a nice return, and he's fine. But he's never gonna go 70 yards for a touchdown. He never will, unless a bunch of guys fall down or Michael Clay's coaching the other team. But that's a cheap shot, and I feel bad about it, but I'm standing by it. And Boston did a nice job at the end of the year. But again, it took them 11 weeks to get Boston out there.
He's a free agent now anyway.
He's a free agent now. I think he'll be back. I think out of all the guys, he's most likely to be back. But
should be able to figure that one out.
Yeah, I think they'll get that one done. But yeah, and they haven't, like, Jake Elliott's as good as, he's top 5 kicker, I think. But they haven't had good punt. Sipas was better this year than last year. Then Curran wasn't very good.
What's your breakdown on Rick Lovato from this year?
I thought he was the least of their worries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you like his form all year?
Yeah, I thought he got into that, he started slumping around the Pittsburgh game, but he snapped out of it.
Nice.
But yeah, it's surprising. Special teams hurt him this year.
It did. It was certainly the weakest.
Where did they end up in Gosselin's ranking?
31st in Gosselin, 29th, tied for 29th in PFF. So, there's no perfect way to gauge how effective special teams are because there's so many areas, but in 2 of the most reputable places, they're pretty low.
And what were they last year?
They were in the low 20s, so like 21st or 22nd.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah, not good. And it's a far cry from when they were consistently in the top 10 in those early years under Phipp.
Yeah. Phipp's really good. Yeah.
And Michael Clay, he was under Phipp, and you hope that some of that would be with him. And it's like, I agree with you. He hasn't done anything that save his job necessarily, but it's also kind of tough to figure out how much is him, how much is personnel, how much is the organizational philosophy and not putting resources into the personnel. I don't know. He has to get better though.
Yeah. Well, they have, they're going to draft a lot of players, and you would hope that a bunch of them become special teams stars. They're going to have to.
Yeah. And they when they finally brought Christian Ellis up and said, all right, he's on the roster, he's playing, that really helped quite a bit. So I think maybe that showed the organization we need some of these guys to just be special teamers. Kyron Johnson, my guy, a little disappointing. Early in the season, I thought he was playing well. He was getting doubled and ended up being inactive for the last few games of the year in the playoffs. I think they have something in Zach McPherson, but eventually he might need to be a starter. Josh Jobe looked like a pretty good special teamer.
He might be a starter.
Kayvon Wallace ended up being a pretty good special teamer.
Yeah, he did. He did.
Not what they thought maybe once upon a time that he would be, but you could take that for a 4th round.
Sure.
Yeah. That's all we have on special teams. Gotta love a good Eagles lost the Super Bowl. We're starting with special teams.
It was a big factor, and
it was. Yeah. And we said all year, man, special teams going to cost them a game.
We said that all year.
Didn't think it was going to be the freaking Super Bowl, and it didn't. It wasn't the only reason, but it played a role.
Yeah, we walked down to I don't know how many times we had that conversation walking down to the interviews or to practice, and special teams is going to cost them at some point. You just kind of felt it, and they sure did.
Yeah. The other newsy item from this press conference.
We both were trying to ask the same question at the same time.
We were, and you yelled louder than me, and you got it in.
I was a little closer.
Yeah.
That was one of my bigger yelling achievements this year because there was 20 people yelling.
It was a good win.
Yeah, it was. I don't know what I did differently. I just kind of tried to stick to my core values.
We'll watch the tape.
Yeah, I'll try to learn from it. Yeah. But I was really curious if Shane Steichen has such a flair for play calling. With him gone, would Nick go back to calling the plays? Assuming Brian Johnson's going to be the OC.
He's going to be the OC.
I know, but the way the Eagles do things, they don't announce anything until all the coaches are in place, and that means every assistant, every position coach, every coordinator, every intern, every quality control guy. So as guys move up, they're going to fill those spots, and they'll announce it all at once. Probably won't be for another week at least. But anyway, Nick said, I'm not calling the plays. He said, I'm more comfortable being the CEO. He didn't use that phrase today, but he just likes being untethered by that responsibility. And look, they got good last year, right when he gave it up to Shane. And Shane had it all year and was terrific at it. Number 3 offense in the league. You saw the, I think he and Jalen were really locked in on the same page. Obviously, I think Brian Johnson will be. He's known Jalen since he was about 3. Not surprising, but it's interesting to know. And look, like you said earlier, he wouldn't make that decision if he didn't know who the offensive coordinator was going to be. It's like, well, the new offensive coordinator is going to call plays. I don't know who it is, but yeah, he'll do that. So it's going to be Brian. And
part of me was wondering if it would be the OC though. Like, I kind of don't hate the idea of Kevin Patullo calling plays.
Yeah.
And freeing up Brian Johnson to just worry about Jalen.
It's an interesting thought. Brian Johnson has had success calling plays. I was looking this up. He first called plays 2 years at Utah, and I don't even know what happened to my story, but they averaged 27 and 28 points a game. Then he called plays 1 year at Houston, and they averaged like well over 400 yards and 29 points a game. And then he called plays, kind of split it with Dan Mullen, it looks like, at Florida his 1 year, but they averaged 40 points a game. I think with his relationship with Jalen and really having such a deep developed sense of what Jalen wants to do, what he likes, what he doesn't like, because their relationship is so good, I think he'll be really good at it. And it's a high bar. Shane was great. Shane was as good. I mean, Doug was really, really good. We've seen some. I thought Marty at times.
There were some times where Marty was cooking, man.
Yeah. Marty. Yeah.
Marty was thinking 10 plays ahead at times.
Yeah. Yeah. So they've had some good play callers, but Marty was fun. I think Nick just likes. And he said, if I need to talk to the defense, if I need to talk to the coaches upstairs, he said before, if I need to talk to one of the refs,
which he's done before.
He has done before, and it's important. You have to do that. That's part of if you're calling plays, if you're locked in, and I think it's important to note that this is his offense, and it was never Shane Steichen's offense. It's Nick's offense. It's his scheme. It's his game plan. It's his approach. It's just someone else calling the down to down. They're calling Nick's plays, essentially. So it's still his offense, and you need good synergy between the two guys, but I think they have it. I think there's a lot of value in promoting from within, which they're going to do at least on one of the sides. And but it's a big challenge for Brian, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, I think, on the last pod, but it kind of like swings back and forth as we talk about the importance, because it's like once people start to overvalue play calling, we have to remind everyone it's Nick's offense. And once play calling gets like no one cares about it anymore, no, it's an important skill to call those plays. And I think both are true. Nick doesn't enjoy the play calling aspect of it as much as he does game planning. So that's the part he cares about. That's the part he wants to do. Whereas like Doug Peterson really wanted to be the guy calling plays on game day. And like, I can't imagine what it would take for Doug to ever give that up.
It's Doug's favorite thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, he said that it's his favorite.
And
thing.
Nick's favorite thing is during the week, finding matchups, finding ways to exploit the other team, going in with a game plan and kind of setting up the plays that the guy will call. So I think it works for them. And I think there really is value to freeing him up on game day.
Yeah. If he likes it, then it's the right thing to do. I think I looked up their, I don't even know what I did with this story, but I think they're 21-5 since we think he handed over play calling to Shane. It's not a bad record.
Not bad at all.
21-3 or 20-2 with their starting quarterback, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Not bad. Anyway.
Yeah. Other takeaways from this press conference. He was asked about the defensive coordinator position. Obviously, another one they have to fill with Jonathan Gannon now in Arizona. He did talk about just, overall the importance to him of hiring from within. And he said, that's where we're going to look there first. That doesn't mean we won't look elsewhere, but we're going to look there first. And we'll get into some names a little bit later of defensive coordinators. But the obvious one in-house would be Denard Wilson. So I think that's where they'll start. And if Denard ends up being the guy, I wouldn't be shocked.
I'd actually be surprised if he's not. Nick was so adamant about how much he values hiring from within, and we have really good candidates. I think Nick really likes talking to outside people to find out what they think about the franchise and him and the team. I think there's great value in that. I mean, the more people you can interview and you learn from them.
Heck, the Eagles are infamous for their head coaching interviews.
Yeah. So I think I'm expecting. I heard, I think we mentioned Tuesday. I talked to Bradbury about who won't be here, but he spoke so highly of Denard Wilson, and it just makes the most sense when you want continuity and you want. You want a guy who knows the personnel and knows the scheme and knows what Nick wants in a scheme. But I don't think it's a lock. There's some other good candidates.
Yeah, and I think they should keep an open mind here because there are going to be some good candidates out there. And an important thing with Denard too is I don't think if they hire Denard, it just means it's Gannon 2.0. No. Like Denard's his own guy. He's coached under other good coaches. He comes from different schools of thought. Now, Nick made it very clear that there's a way he wants defense to be coached, so it has to kind of fit within those parameters. And one of those big things is eliminating explosive plays, and that's what Gannon's defense was designed to do. So that'll be a part of it, and that's something that I think kind of goes against the grain of like super, super aggressive defenses. But we'll see how that kind of bears itself out. I found that interesting, though, that he did talk up the internal candidate so much.
Yeah.
Without saying his name.
Right. No doubt. Anybody else internally on defense that?
Well, Nick Rawlis is the other guy who makes some sense. I know there have been some whispers about Gannon potentially hiring him away, but he's 29. He's going to be a defensive coordinator at some point. I don't know if it's now, but I think that's in his future.
Yeah, he's an impressive guy. I had some good chats with him out in Arizona. It's the only time we really get to talk to the assistant coaches, so it was good to kind of catch up with some of those guys. And he's a good young coach. The players love him, even the ones that he's younger than.
Yeah, he didn't have that this year, did he?
He
only coaches like 3 players.
Yeah, no, I don't think he did.
Yeah, he did when he got here. Eric Wilson was older than him.
Yeah.
Didn't last long.
Did not. No.
Some other things from this press conference. First, let's talk about Howie's tone. He acted like someone just stole his dog.
It really did.
It's 4 or 5 days later. We get that you're upset.
It was a little performative.
Yeah.
He wants everyone to know just how sad, how heartbroken,
we understand, but I thought Nick struck the right tone.
Yeah, I agree.
It was this sucks. We don't want to feel this again, but this is life, right?
Yeah.
We got to move on. I thought that was the right tone.
Yeah, that's Howie. I mean, everything with Howie's calculated, and he's trying to show that how much he cares, and he does care, and I think everyone understands that he doesn't need to do that.
Yeah.
I asked him about the field conditions, and you could barely hear his answer.
I know. Yeah.
Both teams. It was the same for both teams. I was like, yeah, but your edge rushers got affected more, and that's your strongest.
Yeah,
it was the same for both teams.
The tone was a bit much. I think he did the right thing by not saying, "Yeah, it really killed us."
Yeah, I just wanted to give him a chance to say, we filed a complaint with the league or something, whatever, which they should. But yeah, and the irony is that Gannon's now coaching there. He's,
it's funny. I was watching that Gannon introductory press conference, and was it Bidwell? One of them was like, Jonathan was out here last week, saw our facilities, and all I could think about was like, yeah, and everyone said they suck. So that's that.
Yep.
Nick was asked about some of the stuff from the actual game. It's our first chance to really talk to him. We talked to him right after the Super Bowl ended, and it's like, it's tough to ask specific questions about the game at that point.
I was really struck by on Monday. Now, when was media day? Tuesday? Monday, right? Monday night?
Yeah.
There was 1,000 people around Nick. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, he's at a podium. Or there's 500, 300 people. I don't know how many, 200 people in there from all over the world. Today, there's 10 of us in there.
Yeah.
It's just it's the contrast is really striking. It's like, you lost the Super Bowl. You're back to me, Dave, Elliott, Kempsky, McManus, McLean. And,
that's your punishment.
It's like the same 8 guys who are.
That's like that's the best. They should show that on videos before the Super Bowl. Like, you win the Super Bowl, you get a parade. You lose, here we are.
Yeah, me, Dave, Kempsky, and Elliott
firing questions about your decision making in the fourth quarter. But he was asked about, and it was the one decision I disagreed with. And he was vehemently backed it again.
And I agreed with it. Yeah, we disagree on this.
Yeah, we disagree on that. It was 4th and 3 from their own 32. He punted. He said
10.5 minutes left.
Yeah, he said 32 of 32 head coaches would make that call. I might email them all tonight and find out if that's true, because I don't think that's true.
Hey, Shane, in that situation,
and I'll start with Shane, and then I'll go right to Dougie P.
Yeah,
on that. But hey, he backed his own decision. I give him credit for that. He also talked about the other 4th down, and I agree with that one.
And he said if it was a 2-possession game, obviously down, I would have gone for it.
Yeah. He was asked about those motion plays. Gave credit to the Chiefs. It still can't happen.
Yeah.
Probably not going to throw his defensive coordinator under the bus, who's now in Arizona, but
yeah,
can't happen. He was very complimentary about Brian Johnson, even though we wouldn't say he's the offensive coordinator. Like,
that was very slick of Dave, because Dave asked him about Brian, and he raved about him. And like, we all know what the quotes for when he gets hired.
Yeah.
But he answered it really well.
Yeah, he did. And he made a point to, like, because obviously you talk about the quarterback's coach, everyone just says Jalen played better. Brian Johnson, Jalen. Brian Johnson, Jalen. But he has other quarterbacks, and Nick made it a point to say he also deals with our other players. And that's kind of telling, because he's going to have to deal with the entire side of the ball, and honestly, some defensive players, because he has had coaching aspirations too. And I'm sure Nick will start to groom him the same way he did with Steichen and Gannon.
Yeah.
Maybe don't do it so well this time. Maybe hold on to him a couple
to get
years.
more than 2 years out of him. Yeah, we'll do that in a couple of years, Brian. It's crazy. I mean, that the Nick Sirianni coaching tree already has 2 head coaches, and there's going to be more. There's going to be more. I mean, it took Big Red. Who was the first one to leave? I think it was Ron Rivera in 2003, or after the 2003 season, because he wasn't here for the Super Bowl. So it took Andy 5 years to have one, and then they all started leaving, Spags and Shermer and Brad and McDermott and all those guys. But yeah, Nick's ahead of Andy's pace.
Yeah. And Brian's the other one on this staff that I think makes the most sense
as a future head coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could see Patullo, but he's going to have to get an OC role somewhere.
Sure.
Call some plays.
And
defensively, maybe Denard.
I mean, I think so many teams just want a quarterback whisperer. And, I mean, that seems to be the path: quarterback coach, OC, head coach. So you're on that track. And Brian is.
He's an impressive young coach.
He is.
How old is he? He's like 35?
Oh, I think he's 34, 35. Yeah. He talked a little bit about Jordan Davis, how he did, and I think they both did. I don't remember, but I think it was Howie, right?
Yeah,
yeah. Because
Nick too, because he said he's he was on a team in Georgia where he had a lot of good linemen. He comes here, he's on a team with a lot of good linemen, and there's just not enough snaps to go around.
But there will be, and they're really high on him. And Nick said, Nick ran through all his characteristics and traits, and but I think I asked Howie this: when you sign a quarterback to a huge contract, everything changes as far as who you can keep. And Howie emphasized, we have all these draft picks, and this is why, basically, because we're not going to be able to. He said, we're not going to be able to keep everyone. They'll be able to keep some guys. It might be Boston and TJ, and it might be a handful of guys, but they're not going to lose everyone. They'll be able to, keep probably one big name guy, big money guy. Mm-hmm. But he emphasized just that he connected why they have so many draft picks with Jalen's contract, and obviously they have to keep drafting well, and that becomes the biggest challenge for this team. And they've done better the last few years. I'm not ready to say last year's draft was bad because the guys just didn't have a chance to play. I still think Nakobe's going to be a good player. I think Jordan's going to be a good player. And
Cam Jurgens obviously didn't have. I think there's a good chance he's playing next year,
right
one
guard.
way or the other.
I think he's going to be the right guard. Yeah, if Kelsey comes back, that makes perfect sense. Have a young, cost-controlled guy, on a rookie second-round salary as your right guard instead of paying Isaac $13 million or whatever he's going to make.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're going to have some of these guys, whether it's Zach McPherson, Nakobe. They're going to have to play, and the young draft picks are going to have to play. So,
and you're going to have 2 first rounders, so there's a chance to,
if that's what they end up with, they're not going to. But do you think they're going to draft twice in the first round?
Yeah.
Do you really?
I do.
It's possible.
I mean, I think it's very possible. Now they could trade down from the 31st or 30th pick, I guess it is this year, and recoup some. But I think this is going to be a team that needs to find some impact players in the first round.
Yeah.
And it's because of that Hurts contract and how he was asked about it. Didn't shy away from it as much as you thought he might. I mean, he said, basically, we want to keep all of our good players, and Jalen is one of our good players.
Yeah.
That's as much as he can go into it, but it's very clear that they want to get this done.
Yeah.
I'm reading between the lines there. Howie didn't say that. He tries not to talk about individual contracts, but this is not a run-of-the-mill contract. This is a franchise-altering move. And I that was part of my question was like, do you want to get this in place before you figure out anything else? I think there's a reason we didn't see any extensions during the season this year like we did last year.
Right.
It's because you have this giant thing hovering over the franchise. You got to figure it out first.
I thought Tim McManus asked a good question about, are you a little gun shy giving out this kind of deal because of what happened to the last big money quarterback contract you gave out? It didn't end well. And how he said, I think Howie was really selecting his words carefully. And he said, I don't want to, be critical of anybody, but we have no doubt in our mind that this is our guy moving forward. Basically saying he's not the guy in Indy. He's not Carson. And we don't have any qualms giving him this money and worrying that the same thing's going to happen. Just don't draft a guy in the second round next year.
But I also think if they did,
he wouldn't care.
He wouldn't care, which is a difference that is notable, and maybe we didn't see that as much as we should have back then. But yeah, I think they're going to try to pay him. I think they're going to try to get it done as quickly as possible. They have a bunch of things they're going to try to do quickly right now. They're going to try to hire these coordinators and get the coaching staff in place. You'd think, before the combine, because you're going to start scouting players.
Right.
You got to know what you're fitting them into.
Exactly.
And then the quarterback before free agency starts in mid-March. I think that would really help to have that in place. And then you can kind of work from there. You have some time here to re-sign your own free agents. They're not able to talk to anyone. I think until March 13th is when the legal tampering period opens. And there's no timeline necessarily, but I think there should be some urgency here. And you're like, it's like you woke up at noon and everyone else is already living their life. You got to kind of get out of bed and get to it.
Yeah. I think the Jalen thing is going to get done, maybe even at the combine. You sit down and because I think both sides know the general framework and kind of where it's going to. I'm sure Howie has tons of notes, and he's been planning for this for a while. So
yeah, I'm curious to see. I think we know the framework of average per year, but I think the guaranteed money is I think we're almost at a tipping point in the NFL where these quarterback contracts, we saw with the Deshaun Watson contract, and that's obviously kind of an outlier with the guaranteed money in that deal. Cleveland did whatever they had to do to get him, but I wonder if we're going to see some of these huge deals kind of look more like that.
Possible.
And I think that's probably the hold up on the Lamar deal.
Yeah.
And he's working without an agent, obviously.
Yeah.
Jalen does have an agent, so maybe it'll come together a little easier than the one Baltimore has.
Yeah, you would hope so, because nobody wants a situation like that. It doesn't help anyone.
No, certainly doesn't. If you have the guy, you want to keep the guy.
At Nissan, we just made your choice for a new car an easier one than ever with our most exciting and fuel-efficient lineup. Choice is yours. Now get great offers across our full line. Shop your local Nissan store today at nissanusa.com.
Catch all the sports action and more at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Whether it's the money line or the pass line, there's something for everyone in a great sports book. Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Philly loves a winner. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Opioid addiction is a national public health crisis. The Someone You Know podcast from the Independence Blue Cross Foundation offers inspiring stories that challenge stigma, offer hope, and humanize disease of addiction. Download the new Season 3 of Someone You Know on all major podcast platforms. Roob, Jonathan Gannon, we watched his introductory press conference. He is in Arizona. We don't have to talk about him anymore, and I'm kind of happy about that because he became such a lightning rod in this city. I look forward to congratulating the next defensive coordinator on soon becoming the most hated person in Philadelphia. Who do you think it's going to be? You think it's going to be Denard Wilson?
I do. After hearing Nick today talk so, just strongly about promoting from within and what good candidates there are, I'd be surprised if it's not.
Okay, but I have some names here.
Let's go through them.
Some external names, because obviously Denard Wilson, Nick Rawlis are the two internal candidates that seem the most likely. Vance Joseph, a report surfaced from Josina Anderson that the Eagles are interested in perhaps interviewing him. Apparently Gannon's going to interview him in Arizona. We're going to see, I think Denver wants to or has interviewed him. Interesting name, has been a DC for quite a while now, former head coach, very different philosophically from Jonathan Gannon. Vance Joseph, a ton of man coverage, blitzed the heck out of you. It is like the second highest blitz rate in the NFL this year. It would be a lot different.
Yeah, and I wonder about it's interesting they're bringing him in because I wonder if that's
or they're interested in bringing
him in. I'm not sure that's what Nick is looking for, but he's certainly a good name.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to know if, like, all right, Vance, you had this defensive line. Are you blitzing as much? Like, is that just something that's ingrained in him? I want to do this. I want to be this type of defense, or is he willing to kind of bend a little bit to what his players are? You look back at his teams, and they're aggressive. It's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work.
No.
But he's certainly a big name. I have some other ones here. Gerard Mayo, who interviewed for the head coaching gig in 2021. He's coaching linebackers.
Inside
linebackers. Yeah, because they have 3-4 schemes, right. So they have like pass rushers. But seems ready for a DC job. I mean, the Eagles were apparently like blown away with him in their head coaching interview a couple years ago. So he was a name I had on my mind. Like, who would Nick maybe hire him? But then they went the Gannon route.
Yeah, I mean, there's you hear that Belichick loves him so much that he's going to be the heir apparent up there.
When's that going to happen?
Yeah, I don't know, 30 years.
Yeah.
But maybe there's some kind of understanding. But I always liked him. Tennessee, played at Tennessee, right? Gerard Mayo.
Yeah.
He was a good player. I like the name. I always liked him.
Yeah, it's he's young too. He's 36. Next one, we have Alan Williams, who's technically the defensive coordinator in Chicago under Matt Eberflus, but Flus is, it's his defense. And even though Williams calls plays, I wonder if he'd be open to being the guy on defense. He worked with Sirianni before. Now, I don't know if that would be considered a lateral move. It probably would be because he's already calling plays. So, they'd have to let him out of that. Right. But I think the Eagles might have some interest.
They could. It's good connection there.
Yeah. We'll kind of go through these names quickly. Brendan Daly, Chiefs linebackers coach. He was also their defensive line coach. A name that I've heard kind of tossed around a little bit throughout the years. Someone to keep an eye on. George Edwards, longtime co-defensive coordinator in Minnesota, was there with Gannon, was under Mike Zimmer for a while. Been a long time.
Been under three coaches there, I think.
Yeah, he's been around for a long time. Last few years he's been with Dallas and Dan Quinn in in Dallas. I was looking at Chicago on my list here. John Pagano, younger brother Chuck Pagano, former DC in the league, a lot of experience, worked with Nick Sirianni in San Diego when the Chargers were still there. Obvious connection with him. Same with Dave Borgonzi, who's the linebackers coach in Chicago, held the same role in Indianapolis. So we have some connections there. Peter Hansen, Sean Desai, two guys who are Fangio disciples. You know, we know the Eagles like that Fangio system. There's a reason he was here in training camp. There's a reason this defense ended up mirroring a lot of those principles. So if they want to keep that going, those are two options. Chris Richard, who was once thought to be like the next coming, he was going to be the next big coordinator, next big head coach, hasn't quite worked out. He's on the market again. And then outside the box here, Mike Zimmer. You know, when they hired Gannon, we thought, oh, they're getting Mike Zimmer's protege. And then Gannon didn't really run a lot of the Mike Zimmer stuff.
Right.
So you want to go that route? He'd be fun because he's just an old cranky man. But
so you're saying I'd get along with him?
Maybe.
What about Jeremiah Washburn?
Interesting. Another internal guy we haven't really talked about. I think Jeremiah Washburn can do whatever job they give him.
Yeah.
He's a very impressive guy who we probably don't talk about enough. He was their overhang coach this year. So the outside backers, the defensive ends, was in the scouting world for a while, has done both here.
I was doing both at the same time.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. Interesting. I don't know if he's ready to be a defensive coordinator. I think eventually maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a guy I never really spent any time with. Again, on Wednesday, no, it was Thursday. Sat down with him for a good long while at the team hotel.
Smart guy, right?
Yeah. Really enjoyed talking to him, and we ended up, I turned my recorder off eventually. We ended up talking football for another 10 minutes because by then you had everything. I had everything I needed. Really liked talking to him. Really interesting guy, and we had a really deep talk about. It was interesting how much he talked about how he and Rocker work together. Tracy Rocker is the D-line coach. Kind of works with the inside guys. And, it was really interesting. We finished. I got up and, shook his hand, thanked him. I said, it was really interesting. He goes, you think that was interesting? I was like, yeah, like I never get to talk football with you. He's like, yeah.
Another side of this, too, is like we know Nick likes continuity. If you bring in outside coach so-and-so, they might want to bring in their own staff defensively. And they do have some pretty good lower level coaches here on that defensive side of the ball. Guys that Nick really likes.
DK.
If it's the DK McDonald, assistant DBs.
That's another reason.
Tyler Scudder is a defensive quality control guy he really likes. He was his assistant last year. Nick Rollis, obviously the linebackers coach. We'll see if he sticks around. But Jeremiah Washburn in that category. Tracy Rocker, who isn't young, but seemed to have a pretty good year this year.
That's another reason you can make the case for Denard, because it seems like they'd like to promote DK, and he could be the secondary coach. He's now assistant secondary coach, so it would all kind of seem to make sense. He loves DK. He talks about him all the time.
Yeah. Then I bet they'd promote Tyler Scudder to his job.
Yeah.
There are reasons to do both, and you can't do both. So you got to figure out which one wins. And I think they'll interview some candidates, and if they get blown away, they'll hire one of those guys. I don't think they'll be gun shy because they want to keep some continuity because they like these guys. I think if they interview a candidate that really blows them away, they'll go for it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think that's true because Nick goes into all these things with an open mind. I mean, he wouldn't bring a guy in just for lip service. So,
and he's told us a story about Jamal Singleton 1,000 times about he was the 9th running backs coach they hired, and when they got him in the room, they said, "Oh, this is our guy."
Yeah,
I don't think that's crazy to think that could happen with the defensive coordinator position too.
I agree. I think the most likely is Denard.
Okay. You wrote a column.
You wrote a column first.
I did write a column first. Well, technically, you probably wrote a column long before I wrote a column.
But these specific columns. We had little dueling columns.
We did. So we talked about the gist of my column on the last pod. So if you haven't heard that, I'll give you a brief synopsis. Basically, my point was that this loss in the Super Bowl should be very crushing. It should hurt quite a bit because it's hard for me to imagine anything ever lining up the way it did for the Eagles this season. And the myriad of factors for that, quarterback on a rookie deal, the schedule, especially in the playoffs, having Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, having all these pieces because you had that cheap quarterback. It's hard for me to imagine it ever being you ever being in a better situation than you were this year.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that, but I also I wanted to take the opposite tack and just point out that the teams that do get to multiple Super Bowls have an owner who's willing to do whatever it takes to support the GM and the coach. They have a successful head coach who knows how to win. They have a GM with a proven track record of managing the cap, bringing in talent, and they have a elite quarterback. And that the Eagles have all those things. And as long as they have that in place, and there's no reason to think they won't anytime soon, but you never know, and we've seen that, they're going to have a chance. And I also look at the NFC landscape. I think the best quarterbacks, the best teams are in the AFC, which gives the Eagles a little bit easier path. And look, there's going to be that team that goes, 12-5 or 13-4 next year. That was, that won 5 games this year. I mean, it happens every year that some team ascends and some good team declines. And I'm well aware of the record of Super Bowl losing teams in particular, not getting back to the Super Bowl. But I'm not saying they'll get back there next year, but I just think with this group in place, Howie, Nick, Jalen, obviously Jeff Lurie or Julian Lurie, that they will get back to another one and maybe multiple ones because they have all the key pieces and you just have to trust Howie's ability to keep finding young talent who can replace the guys who have to leave. I didn't even mention in the story. I mean, they have AJ and Devontae under contract for a couple, at least a couple more years. They've got pieces. I think Howie's grown so much as a GM that you trust his drafting a lot more than the days of Fireman Danny and Marcus Smith. I'm pretty bullish on the future, and I think all your points were well stated. But I feel pretty confident we'll be going back to another one of these soon.
Okay, yeah, I'm not saying that I don't think they will. I just think it's gonna be harder.
It's fair.
Much harder.
Yeah. But you guys can read both columns and then tweet which one you like better. Like, that's not fair.
Yeah. You got anything else here?
No.
Yeah. We're gearing up for what should be a pretty crazy offseason.
Yeah, it's going to be. I mean, look, we're going to be doing pods throughout the offseason. There's so much. They're going to be hiring coaches. In not too long, we'll be talking draft. You'll be at the combine.
Yeah, and gosh,
13 days.
Yeah, I'm not ready for that.
We'll be doing pods. And then the draft. There'll be free agency just in another month, which is crazy to think of. I would guess in the next few weeks they're going to start signing players, including Jalen, and off we go. So. When you're in the Super Bowl, man, that off season is really condensed and it's starting already.
Yeah, it is. All right. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. I'm so used to that script, but I do want to say we appreciate that. We got a lot of 5-star reviews when we're doing daily pods at the Super Bowl, and very much appreciate.
Yeah, those reviews are fun, and keep sending them. I just want to say one thing. We met so many people out in Arizona. At the hotel, just walking around the streets.
At the live pod,
certainly, who just had really nice things to say about the podcast. And we really appreciate that. Like, it really means a lot. We're doing it for you guys. So we appreciate the support. It's fun to meet everyone. It's fun to meet everyone. It was a little crowded there at the pep rally.
It was. Yeah, but it's you know what I like? I like meeting people who are like, yeah, I live in Arizona, but you guys are my connection to the team. That's always really cool.
Yeah, I got a few. I got one guy who lives in, where did he say? He lives in Australia. Mm-hmm. And he came up to one of the pressers and said, that's how I keep track of the Eagles through your podcast. Yeah, it's really cool. It's really fun. We appreciate all of it.
Yep. All right. That's it for Roob. I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye presented by Nissan. We'll talk to you soon.